So I'm actually going to share my screen with all of you and just give a quick introduction again. My name is Caro. I run the GreenSkills Tree Planting and Green Jobs program at URI, and I'm so excited that everyone has joined us for our first mini training and discussion about how to be an effective New Haven tree ambassador. It is kind of a new role that we're envisioning for our team and program, but really a lot of people have worn this hat without the official title for many years. And let's see, I think that we're just gonna dive right in. Basically the framework, how this is gonna work, I'm gonna share some information for the first 15 minutes or so. And then we're gonna have time for questions and comments and for people to jump in and share some tips that they have from their own experience. But you don't have to wait to share a question. You can actually open the chat box again by going to the bottom of your screen and pressing the chat icon. You can throw in a question in real time, and then we'll probably get to them at the end. And I'm going to open my chat box in a moment. But first, before we get started, it's April Fool's Day, so I wanted to start with a quick tree joke. We're all on Zoom, on the internet, physically distanced but socially connected. And I want to ask, how do trees get on the internet? Well, they log in. Okay, well, thanks for bearing with me with that cheesy tree joke. Now that that's behind us, I'm going to launch in. All right. And I'm opening the chat. Okay, good. Rachel liked it. Great. So first, I just want to share a little bit of background about the GreenSkills program. It's URI's public tree planting and green jobs program, and it's one of really 3 major programs that we're running right now. We have our community green space program, which Ms. Leslie talked about over at Truman Street, where we work with neighborhood volunteers all over the city. The program, green jobs programs, so it's really primarily street tree planting, and we have paid crew members on our team that help us get the job done. We do it with a partnership between Urban Resources Initiative and the City of New Haven, and we have been planting trees via our Green Jobs program since 2007. And it is a request-based model, so every single one of those trees that's planted is done per the request of a resident or a business iner in New Haven. And owners and renters are eligible for free trees, and we plant in the public right-of-way most of the time. So it is on city-owned property, and anyone who's willing to water and care for a tree can be a tree adopter. To the generous funding of New Haven and grants that we receive every year and private donations from individuals, we're able to offer this program free for the tree adopter. So they get a tree at no cost to them, and in return, they agree to water the tree for the first 3 years that it's in the ground. So it's a big commitment that they make, but one that we think is so worth it, not only for them, but for the whole community. And through this program, our GreenSkills program, we have planted 6,035 trees and counting. And we've planted those trees for 2,600 unique tree adopters. So that is an incredible network of New Haven residents who have really shown a commitment to caring and stewardship of their own front yard and their block. Okay, so that's just some broad brush strokes about the GreenSkills tree planting program. And now I'm gonna launch into talking about, well, okay, we plant by a request-based model, but how do we identify all of these new tree adopters? So we need to do a lot of outreach every year, every season, to make sure that people know about our program, that it's a free city service that's available to all New Haven residents. So to do that, we do a lot of door-to-door canvassing, knocking on doors, talking to residents, leaving postcards like the ones that you see on the right side of your screen. We put up street tree banners hung across Whitney Avenue, Howard Avenue, Dixwell Avenue. We put up lawn signs that maybe some of you have seen, like the one in the bottom right-hand side of your screen, request your free tree. We post flyers and distribute postcards via our community partners. We post on social media, and so do our partners as well. We send out email newsletters like through the Parks Department, and we have these cool tree tags attached to every tree that we plant so that people know what that tree is, its name, but also that they too can request a free tree in front of their home. We've presented at community meetings like the community management team meetings. We get referrals from city staff, but we also spread the news via word of mouth. So, you know, people telling other people that they've received a free street tree, and the opportunity is out there for their friends and neighbors to do the same. So this pie chart on the right side of your screen shows how, of all the trees that were planted in 2019, how did tree adopters hear about URI's free tree planting program? And that largest slice of the pie in green shows that most people heard about our program through direct URI staff outreach, but the next largest slice of the pie is word of mouth. So a lot of people learn about the opportunity to plant a free tree via their friends and neighbors, people that they trust. And we really think that there is an opportunity to grow this slice of the pie, to turn more tree adopters into tree ambassadors, and to have people who participated in the program who love their tree be our biggest advocates. So if you are thinking to yourself, I love my tree, and would love to see more trees in my neighborhood, how can I spread the good news about URI's free tree planting program? Well, you can become a tree ambassador. Okay, so the next part of the presentation is really an opportunity for us to share some ideas for how you can step into that role as tree ambassador and take action in your own neighborhood. As we're going through this, or as I'm going through this, if you think that we've missed something, hold on to that, either throw it in the chat box or ask it at the end. We really want to hear your input. So first and foremost, if you are wanting to be a tree ambassador and to get more of your neighbors to plant trees in your neighborhood, you can tell your friends and neighbors to adopt a tree personally. This could look like canvassing your street, knocking on doors. I know that in this era that we're in right now, where we're doing most of our connecting from inside our homes and from our front porches, this might not feel, this might not be the approach for this month or for the next few months, but eventually we'll be out there walking our blocks again. And we've created this flyer that is black and white that you can print at home and put your own name on the flyer so that when you drop it off at your neighbor's house, they know who came by from their own neighborhood and how they can get in touch with you to learn more about the program before agreeing to request a tree. But even before you're able to walk out your front door, you can make phone calls to people that you know or send personal emails and text messages. And really, there's no substitute for a personal connection or request or nudge. You can let people know that you're thinking about them and you want them to know that there's this opportunity for them to request a tree and have one in front of their home. Another thing you can do from the comfort and safety of your living room, you can post to social media. So here on the right side of your screen, you can see an example of a Facebook post that URI made saying one of our tree requesters is celebrating 2 years with this beautiful elm, no regrets, lots of love. And then there is a invitation to request yours here with the URL to our tree request page and some hashtags so that we can have these posts be a part of a community of social media posts about your URI tree. And if you're doing this from your own account, you can tag URI at uri.newhaven. You can also post on Twitter. Our tag on Twitter is at New Haven URI. Here we're thanking all of our tree adopters from this past fall. In total, GreenSkills teams planted 330 free trees for New Haven, but we couldn't have done it without people committed to watering the URI trees. To New Haven friends, adopt a tree now for next spring. So this is an example of the kind of post that you could post as well. We have an Instagram account as well. These are some of our interns tabling in front of Patagonia, one of our funders this season, over the holidays, letting folks know that they can adopt a free tree. And then I've also included Nextdoor as a place where you can post, which is an online forum for people to connect just with people who live in their direct neighborhood. So I know some people in Westville actually posted about URI, and we got a lot of tree requests after a neighbor posted to their Nextdoor community. All right, and you can also spread the news through your neighborhood and broader communities. So casting a wider net, speaking to folks who maybe you don't know personally, but are part of your community management team, or who are members of your school, library, local restaurants, faith communities, etc. And then you can also post information to relevant listservs that you're a part of. And this email on the right side of your screen is just an example of what the Parks Department often includes in their spring newsletter. All right, so these are just a few ideas for ways that you can activate as a tree ambassador. But say that you have done maybe 3 of these things and you've identified neighbors who would like a free tree and are willing to water it. Now what? So there are 2 different ways that you can pass on these requests to us at URI so we can follow up. You can either collect all of the requester contact information yourself. And the things that we need to know about each tree requester, we need to know their name, their address in New Haven, the number of trees that they're requesting, and their phone number and email if they have one. And that's so that we can follow up with them to share our site visit notes, to ask them if they have a preference for the kind of tree that's planted, and to let them know when we're available to come and plant their tree and schedule their tree planting. You can also, if you don't want to do the contact information collecting yourself, just encourage folks to make their own tree request to URI directly, and they can call our office number. We're still answering our phones even though we're not at the office. They can email uri@yale.edu, or they can go to our web request form. And I just want to show you, walk you through how to get to our web request form in case you're just landing on the URI website and are wondering where you need to go to request a tree. So if you go to the URL that's at the bottom there, yalef.es/tree request, it'll bring you right there. But in case you're at the URI webpage, uri.yale.edu, you would go to the Get Involved tab, click on Request a Tree, and that'll bring you to our intake form, where you can read a little bit more about the program and see what the tree adopter commitments are. You can also see a list of trees that we generally plant every season. And then you would fill out the web form and wait for us to get back to you and confirm your tree request and set up a site visit. All right, so that is all that I have prepared in terms of my remarks to you. And so now I really want to open things up and hear anything that you would like to add to our existing strategies. For experienced tree ambassadors, I would love to know, we would love to know what advice you have for those just starting out and trying to promote tree planting. Oh, and bye, Rachel. Thanks for tuning in. Do you have any success stories you can share? And then for those just starting out, what outstanding questions do you have for our team of staff and volunteers? And then for everyone, how can we support your tree ambassador efforts best? So now I'm going to see if I can unmute. Well, now you can unmute yourselves and join us back in video if you like. So first I'll ask if there are any questions.
Caro, thank you for that. Lynn Street did ask a question in the chat. Can neighbors adopt a curbside strip with the property owner's consent?
Yes, so I think the question is if the tree is not in front of your own property, can you adopt a tree if you've agreed to water it and you have the consent from the adjacent property owner? And the answer is absolutely. That happens all the time. It is important to get consent from someone either who lives there or who owns the property, so that we're all, you know, in good faith. But once you've done that, then if you're able to adopt that tree, then we are so grateful and we will absolutely plant one for you. Lynn, did you want to add anything to that question?
I think that answers my question. There's, I'm thinking of a property on our street that has two or three dying ash trees, and would one be able to, as incentive to that property owner, would one be able to say that it might lead to expedited removal of the dying ash trees?
Absolutely. That is true. We add it to our list that we send over to the Parks Department to say, hey, we have a tree request from this property. It can't be planted until this dead tree comes down. And oftentimes those tree removals are more expedited than they normally would be. And that's the case for stump removals as well, because we can provide an extra little nudge to our partners over at the Parks Department.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I got to see a stump removal firsthand a couple weeks ago, right before we went on lockdown. It was fascinating to see.
Is that Rob?
Yeah, it's Rob, sorry.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you saw the stump removal in action, and we're excited to plant for you as soon as our crews can get out in the field again. But actually, Steve Winter, who's not on the call, but he is an alder for Ward 21, and he gets out and does a lot of outreach to his constituents, letting them know that they can have a stump removed and a tree planted as a replacement. And he finds that people get really excited about the idea of an expedited stump removal, and it can be really a win-win, having a stump removed and a beautiful new tree planted in its place. And so that's one way that he's really able to promote the free tree planting program, is by communicating with folks who have stumps in front of their homes or properties. All right.
Do you see Diane has a question too? How do you handle fear of trees or limbs coming down? Like, I'm assuming that means like people who maybe don't want a tree, if you're talking to them and because they fear that they would cause a hazard.
Hi, in Hamden, we were hit by the tornado, and
you're talking
it
to
really
someone who
is-
might be a potential.
Caro?
Oh, yeah.
Diane, I think you froze a little bit there. Diane had a addendum to the question.
Oh, sure. Sorry, Diane. Would you ask it again?
Sure, no problem. The thing in Hamden is because we were hit by the tornado, and people lost thousands of trees, and a lot of property was destroyed. And even if it didn't happen in their particular neighborhood, they are so fearful that it's really put a cramp. I mean, people are literally removing their good trees. It's really upsetting. So to get, to reassure them that this is a safe thing to do. I mean, of course, we would plant smaller trees. These wouldn't be, 40-foot trees or, anything like that. But people are afraid to even, make a start. They're just like frozen.
Yeah, Dan, thanks so much for your question. And I think that, right, we definitely see more people removing trees or fearful of planting trees after a big storm. That's pretty typical, and people are fearful for good reason, I think, but also there's always going to be, a risk with even a healthy tree. But I think that, letting folks know that, you're not going to plant a tree if they don't want one, that it's really their choice. So that the ball is in their court. But that there are so many benefits that are really hard to quantify that trees provide, whether it's shade or energy savings or beautification or, you name it. There's so many benefits, and you can sort of tailor your response to them. But also you can share tree species with them that are known to have particularly strong wood, and we'd be happy to share some of those species with you if that's a particular fear that people have. I think that, it's a tough question. I think that with time, when the shock value isn't quite so strong, people might have different feelings, but certainly letting folks know that you can procure trees that are known for their strong wood, and that, we'd be happy to share some examples of those with you.
Yes, I would really appreciate that.
Okay.
Right now, what we really focus on the benefits of trees and, everything that trees do for us. And we try to have them weigh that against the, possibility that someday a tree might fall somewhere and hurt some property somewhere. So we're hoping they, we're trying to help them have a bigger picture, a bigger focus. But yes, I would love to get that information on trees with hardwood.
Okay, great. And Anna, did you want to say anything, maybe experience that you have communicating with a tree requester with a similar fear?
Well, sometimes I gauge how old the person is and talk about how long it's going to take for that tree to get to a point where it becomes a hazard to them. And not that it's putting off the problem into the future, but if we're realistic about it.
That's a good point. I mean, honestly, it's going to take a few decades for a tree to reach that point where they're so tall that it might pose property damage.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Yeah. And I know Colleen just joined our call. Hi, Colleen.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry to be joining late, but I'm going from one Zoom call to the next.
We're
Welcome.
happy you're here. So Lynn asked again, how about more focus on the health hazards of urban heat islands? It's definitely a social justice issue. Yes, I think that, you know, increasingly we're hearing from people that, you know, they do experience what it's like to not have shade in the heat of summer. And certainly our neighborhoods that have lower tree canopy cover also tend to be our neighborhoods that are going to be most vulnerable to climate change, that are already most vulnerable. And so we try and do more of our outreach in neighborhoods where a tree canopy is lowest and that are going to be best served by an increased tree canopy as climate change, you know, makes our summers hotter, our heat waves more extreme. I think that, you know, we definitely focus our outreach efforts as a staff in places that we know are going to be hit hardest by climate change. And in terms of people's individual sort of awareness or concern about the heat, it really varies, I think, person to person. But we get a lot of folks that say, yeah, I want a tree because I want a shady place to sit on my porch during the summertime when it gets hot.
One of the ways that we, as tree ambassadors, can, I know that our representation right here is mostly East Rock, Prospect Hill, Hamden even. If we do more of our outreach on social media, which is less geographic focused, we might have a wider reach. So can I ask, I don't know if you are able to do the show of hands, raise your hand or something, but is that something that people on this call feel comfortable doing? And do you think we should talk a little bit more about ideas that you might have for boosting our social media presence? I know that Caro and Colleen and I have been thinking about it a lot and have suggested these things that Caro has talked about, but we're curious if you all have ideas of your own that we might be able to share with others, and that that we might all learn from. Does anybody have any ideas, or want to talk a little bit about need more coaching?
I don't know if this has already been brought up yet, but I think that Earth Day could be a great way, or just like an opportunity for people to post about their tree if they haven't already. And that can be an activity, of course, people can do from their home, take a photo of a tree and maybe talk about why they love trees, and talk about why they're a tree ambassador, and encourage people to also do that. So yeah, it's pretty much the same thing around like what you all have already planned for tree ambassadors, but maybe if we tied it into Earth Day somehow, that could be good.
Thanks, Adrienne.
That's a great idea.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm definitely going to do that in Hamden. I'm going to encourage the HAT members and also League of Women Voters to please do that at the very least. You know, try to put something on their Facebook pages and write about why trees are important to them. We hope to do a lot of other things too, but that one I think should be easy for people to participate in.
Hi, this is Aimee Latterman. I live in New Haven, right on Worcester Square, where the cherry blossoms are just about to pop. Yeah, and I was thinking in relation to the woman who just spoke from Hamden, is that Lynn Street? I'm not sure. But
I believe that was Diane.
Yeah, that was Diane.
Okay, Diane in Hamden. I wanted to know if this was an idea that could sort of explode and expand to the neighboring communities outside New Haven, particularly thinking of many people that I know in Woodbridge who have lots of trees around them, but they might very well be good ambassadors for the URI programs and support of URI endeavors. And they also, these are people who come in, well, when we can move around, who come into New Haven quite often and would appreciate everything that would be done here. Is this something that URI is interested in doing, in expanding to neighboring towns? I wasn't able to listen to everything that was happening on the previous discussions.
Thank you, Emily, for your question. So currently, right now, because we get so much of our funding from the city of New Haven, we're only planting in the city of New Haven. I know that at the beginning of the program, we did a little bit of planting in Hamden, maybe some in East Haven as well. Maybe Colleen can actually pop in and answer that question.
Sure.
If she's still on the call.
Yeah, I'm here. I would say we are very fortunate that there are supporters of URI outside of New Haven, including Hamden and Woodbridge. We have not, as Carol pointed out, really done any significant plantings in towns outside of our city, in part because of funding, but in part because it's our mission to work in New Haven. And also our capacity is still relatively small. But that said, we did do a pilot in part of Hamden to work with the town and show how we would, kind of demonstrate how a program could work. And I've given some presentations to their tree commission. And so what I would say is our best role outside of New Haven is really more like a technical advisor and supporter. So I have been in touch with some folks in Woodbridge around inventory and how they could do an inventory there, or in other greater New Haven area towns. I've also worked with the, it's called the SCROG, the South Central Council of Regional Governments, which I think represents 17 towns in the area, to share information with them about how, to share basically materials and ideas of how we have carried out tree planting, so that we could support other towns to do their own tree plantings, whether it's with volunteers or as a case of our green jobs, they could do it with high school students, which is how we began our green job program. And they could scale to meet their needs. So basically, I think that's the best way for us to be a resource to other towns, rather than trying to do plantings in all the other towns, but to help them start up their own programs. So I definitely think our impact can be beyond New Haven, but likely at this time, our actual planting is really limited to New Haven.
Hi, this is Diane. Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Colleen, can you just tell me when you talked to the tree commission, and do you remember who? Was it Tom Parlapiano?
It's been a couple of years since I gave that presentation. We did do a planting in Hamden, and I would say it was probably a decade ago, where we planted in a neighborhood near Mill Rock Road, that area of near the park at the end of Mill Rock Road, that community there that they had lost a lot of trees because of some soil contamination. Oh. And so it was specifically targeted for that community to help address the loss of tree cover that they had. Yeah, but it's been quite a while since we did that.
Okay, so it had.
And I think that the key, that my lead contact there was, I'm just remembering, was an FES graduate, Kath Shoemaker.
Oh, okay, yes. Very good. I'll get in touch with her. Thank you.
Great, sure.
This is Caro again. I wanted to follow up again on Lynn's question about urban heat island as well. I was just thinking about this, that really tree planting is also, I think, can be framed as a localized climate adaptation effort. And so if that's like a group of organizers, or if you as a tree ambassador really wanted to focus on climate adaptation, adapting to rising temperatures in your neighborhood, I think that using tree planting as a tool to do that, as a tool for adapting, could be a really fruitful way of framing why we plant trees and why they're so important. So I just wanted to throw that in because, of course, urban heat island is such is a problem that is only exacerbated by climate change, and there's all this energy around climate change adaptation, and it's something that we can do really at the localized scale on our blocks, in our neighborhoods. And so, you know, being a tree ambassador and having tree planting as a tool is very powerful.
Caro, could I just share a couple of thoughts that I had written down before the meeting started? And
of course.
When you were talking about, I think for those of us who are very enthusiastic about this program, that sometimes it's possible for our enthusiasm to carry us away. And I have felt that it's very important to, for tree ambassadors to respect people's property rights, and the fact that not everybody has very happy associations with trees. And you know, I have neighbors from Iceland, for instance, who just kind of don't get it, but they're going along with the tree thing. But in Iceland, they don't care about trees. And so I think it's important when you set out to do this, to approach a bunch of your neighbors, to recognize that not all of them will be responsive, and not all of them will, you know, you might encounter a certain amount of passive aggression even, where they just kind of don't answer your emails, but then it turns out that they, you know, approached URI because they didn't want to be bossed around by some, you know, neighbor on their block. And, you know, you just kind of understand that and accept it, and accept the fact that you may not be 100% successful. Although I think we actually got pretty close to 100% success on Huntington Street. You just have to kind of gauge, you have to kind of gate your enthusiasm and gauge how much your neighbors are really interested in hearing from you about your enthusiasm, and try not to crowd people. And people will find their way to URI either directly through you or by themselves. Which I think is, I was actually really delighted at how it turned out at the end. In the beginning, I thought we weren't going to get full participation, and we did.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I think that, yeah, it's really important. You said a bunch of really important things. One, not taking or not assuming what you think someone else's response is going to be to your enthusiastic idea that tree planting is really for everyone and every property. I think, you know, personally myself, I've been surprised in both directions by folks that, you know, I thought would be really interested in having trees planted in front of their home or business. I think this is the perfect spot, and they're really just not. And I have to respect that because of whatever associations they may have with trees. And really real, perhaps negative experiences as well. But then people that I thought never, you know, would I think that a plumbing supply store would be interested in having trees planted along their frontage, but in fact they requested 4, and, you know, have watered them dutifully. So I think that being prepared to be surprised either way, and, you know, to be humble in your role is certainly important. And then also just knowing that, right, people will respond to different messages, but also they might choose to get in touch with URI or they might have different preferences for how to move forward with their tree request. For some people, they may really prefer to go through the neighbor that they trust, who's going to manage the process for them. But other people might really prefer to get in touch with us directly and to leave their neighbor out of it. And, you know, just for context, Lynn contacted URI last summer, said I would love to get some neighbors together to plant trees on our block. There were, I don't know, I think maybe 5 properties that had, maybe 5 or 6 that had opportunities for trees. Lynn collected everyone's contact information and met with me. We did a walkthrough of the block, talked about the opportunities, and then Lynn sent a follow-up email to everyone who had a spot for a tree. And then I was able to communicate with each of those people individually, and even the person that decided last fall they didn't really want a tree was inspired by the trees that were planted for their neighbors. And so they've requested trees for this upcoming season. So, you know, knowing that
with that particular neighbor, we had about an hour-long conversation in which, you know, that was a neighbor that had serious tree fear and was worried about, you know, the potential trauma of tree loss 100 years from now. But, you know, the point I made in this long conversation, in which I tried not to crowd him at all, was to say, you know, the answer to sort of fears about the future would not be to not plant trees now. And he came around.
Awesome. Well, thanks for all of your efforts, Lynn.
Can you hear me? Amy
Yes.
Latimer speaking. Can you hear me? I had a thought on a slightly different line. Within New Haven, downtown, in the Worcester Square neighborhood, there are many new developments in the building process right now. They've already been digging, knocking down old buildings, and I am wondering if there has been any contact between URI or the whole forestry school, between URI and the developers of these many new projects that are just now being dug. And this is the time to put in trees when it's very inexpensive to do the digging. The digging is already in process. So I would volunteer, if you want to follow this up, I would volunteer to be in contact with these developers, and I would be absolutely delighted if we could have trees all over these new high-rise and heavy density areas. So,
Emily,
Do you want me to respond to that one, Carol?
Yeah, that would be great. I was thinking you might have some good insights.
Yeah, I would, Emily, I think that could be great, though I want to add one little bit of caution. Sometimes, as part of their development permit, they are required to plant trees by city plan. So, and in those cases, the city our permit with the Parks Department does not allow us to plant ones that the city plan department is requiring them to do, because the trees are partially funded by the Parks Department. So in that instance, we would have to kind of make sure that it's not already part of a permit that they have to plant a certain amount of trees along the frontage of their new property. So I think doing the outreach is a great idea, but it may be that we find if, for example, one of the properties, we could then check with city plan to see if they have to do it by their city plan development permit, or whether it's something that we could move forward on.
okay.
I know that's complicated.
and just to give I have a personal experience when Foster Street lost a lot of ash trees due to the emerald ash borer a couple of years ago. And you identified this is really the only street in East Rock to be hit. We had a strategic approach to all the houses on the street and knocked on all the doors with special flyers to explain to them what was happening to the trees, why they were getting removed, and how we can all take action to replace them. And so thinking about a big project like that, we identified a few species that would look good on the street, and thought about the whole street as a design challenge of its own, and rather than each house as its own choosing its own tree, we thought about what this is trees being impacted, the streets being impacted really heavily by the loss of all these trees, and so we should think about the whole street when we're replacing them. So I invited all of my neighbors to an activity for a meeting to learn about why they were losing the trees, and then to talk about what we can all do to how we can request new ones, and what the options were, and how it was important that we work together to select species that would complement each other, and also avoid the monocrop, the disaster that we lost all of our trees at the same time, by having at least some diversity of trees. And so if you identify a location where there are a lot of trees that need to go in, that's the kind of thing that we would love to work with you to come up with a plan, a strategic plan, and develop flyers, and even potentially have a community meeting. At the end of all the plantings, I hosted my neighbors all for a backyard celebration, and that kind of thing. It's not only helpful for our canopy, but it's also helpful for our neighborhoods to be stronger and work together and to build community that way. So there are lots of benefits to being a tree ambassador. I felt like I met a lot of my neighbors, and I benefited in more ways than just having more trees on my street. But I also now know more of my neighbors, and we have this affiliation that we went back a year later and planted bulbs under our trees together. Rob, I think, did you come out for that? We had a good, it was a there are opportunities beyond just getting more trees on the street, but also in getting to know your neighbors, and we are happy to help you do that if you are interested in having some kind of project like that.
This is Leslie. I just want to go back to the question that I think Emily asked and Colleen did respond to, and I just happen to have the pleasure of sitting on City Planning Commission, and that is part of the site plan review. A lot of questions are asked. There are quite a few green folks on city planning, that are concerned about trees that are taken down for development and ensuring that the builders do replace them. I know that some of them actually are familiar with URI and will consult with URI for confirmation of the best trees to plant. When they were doing some work, I believe down at IKEA, and they wanted to change the front of the warehouse that faces the highway, and there were some trees that they needed to remove, and I believe that they did consult with URI to find out what the best trees would be to replace the ones that they did remove. And I would also like to say, the developers could probably more afford to replace those trees than to use the resources that URI has. But it is good for us to stay on top of that when we do know, because not all of them do. And if it's not really seen on the site plan, that trees are coming down, we might just miss that. So even following up at CMT meetings, when the majority of the good developers will go to the CMTs to advise that they're, proposing to do something, that is a great question that can be asked. I also wanted to say, I know that there was a part of the conversation where people were talking about what folks in other cities can do, even though URI might not plant there. But URI is well known, you know, throughout the surrounding communities. I attended a town hall meeting a couple of years ago in Hamden when they were talking about taking down a lot of trees for the utility companies. It was actually a utility commission meeting or something. And Chris had sent out a clarion call to a lot of green folks to attend. And he actually spoke, and it was well received. There were quite a few people. So I believe the impact of URI is spread abroad outside of New Haven, and we do have a lot of partners outside of New Haven that do come in, and even a lot of people are just looking for, you know, the opportunity to do some good. We've had people that show up in our community in the Hill and in our garden, just wanting to, you know, put their hands to something, I guess as a form of giving back, you know, so a little bit of sweat equity it's a good feeling for them. So that's it.
Thank you, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is after 1. We don't want to take up more of your day. We really appreciate your contribution of your time to talk with us about being a tree ambassador and your interest in becoming one, and or further pursuing your already tree ambassadorships.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you everyone. And also thank you for bearing with us as we try out a new format for URI and maybe for many of you as well. We hope that you're all healthy and safe and stay in touch, and we can't wait to be planting trees with all of you again. So,
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Caro.
Bye, everyone. Have a nice day.
Stay healthy.
Yeah.
You all
Wash your
too.
Bye.
Be good.